Hello there, my name's Michael Darby. I'm with Element Materials in our Connected Technologies division. So I'm a test engineer, notified body, support person for any kind of CE marking testing. Specifically, I focus on radio equipment, but also non-radio as well. So one of the questions I receive often is about harmonized standards. Is it essential for a manufacturer to use a harmonized standard? And what happens if they don't? Well, firstly, there's nothing in the Radio Equipment Directive or the EMC Directive that says you must test or that you must test a certain way. However, you must technically assess your product. So in reality, it points you to harmonized standards or published standards, and those standards are based around testing. So we all test. We test for safety, we test for EMC and radio performance. We should usually use the word assess, but in most cases, it leads to testing. You have harmonized standards on the official Journal of Harmonized Standards, and then you have other standards which are not yet on there. So what's the difference? Well, if you can test and fully apply a harmonized standard for an aspect of the red, then you have what's known as presumption of conformity to that aspect. So whether that's safety or EMC or radio performance. If you have presumption of conformity, then you have a level of confidence that you meet the legal requirements of that aspect of the red. And it would be somebody else's responsibility to prove to you that they think your product is non-compliant. So it puts the sort of onus of proving non-compliance on other people because you have presumption of conformity. If you don't use a harmonized standard, then the onus is on you as a manufacturer to say, well, I didn't use a harmonized standard, but here are the reasons why I think my product complies with the directive. So you're perfectly able to use non-harmonized standards, but it adds in a different sort of risk level. What happens then if you've got a standard which is harmonized and then a new version of the standard comes out? Well, the most common thing is a harmonized standard exists for your product for an aspect of the directive, and then a new version of the standard comes out, and you have a choice. Do you carry on using the harmonized standard or do you use the new draft? And the normal recommendation would be carry on using the harmonized one and wait to see if the European Commission accepts the new published version, and then they would put that on the official journal. They'd both be harmonized standards for a while, and then the original one would drop off. And then you always have a presumption of conformity. But if you want to use the new published standard before it becomes harmonized, that's perfectly okay too. Please do be aware that sometimes standards can become published but not harmonized because there's something wrong with them. So it's not just a default that a new standard is a best standard. People will say the new standard represents the state of the art, and that is true, but what if that new standard proposes things or suggests things which turn out to have been a mistake, and that standard doesn't get harmonized and the original one still exists? So you've got to really weigh up the pros and cons. Now, one thing I would say is that we could talk for ages about should I use the harmonized standard or should I use the new standard? Which one is the best? In reality, in most cases, if you step back and look at both versions, there's not that much different. Usually there's small admin updates, maybe a little bit of a test method at most. It's very rare that the standards are wildly different. So in reality, in most cases, when you go to the lab for testing, you could say, okay, I've got the harmonized standard, I've got the new non-harmonized standard. What will it take to meet both of them? And it's kind of like a Venn diagram, and the little bits that are outside are very, very small. In most cases, one set of testing would cover both. You don't need to have a pretty test report that states compliance with both. You've got to have the evidence or the confidence that you meet both, and then you're covering the harmonized standard and future-proofing by meeting the new standard. So that's a good option. Don't be confused by the date of withdrawal statements inside the standards themselves. Those are not linked to CE marking, and those are more about the standards body supporting the standard. So get in touch if you have any questions, whether you want to use a harmonized standard or a non-harmonized standard, and when that might mandate the use of a notified body, such as myself. All right, take care and good luck.